perhaps you can relate to this client. She is on her own journey of attracting better relationships after having a whole relationship life full of things that are not very nice, full of betrayal, full of cheating, full of self-esteem eroding relationships. And she's taken this journey, she's recognized the pattern, and she's doing something about it. So she's letting go of old attachments. She's walking away from the guys that are toxic for her. She's learning what unhealthy boundaries, what narcissism, what gaslighting all mean. She's reading the books, she's watching the videos, she's doing all the things, but she's still struggling. She's still struggling with these old feelings for these toxic guys, one in particular recently that she can't seem to let go of. She's at that point where she says, I know this guy is bad for me. I know he fits my old pattern, but I can't get away from him. And so she's fighting this secret battle with herself between her old relationship life and her new one. So to help this client, the first thing I asked her is, how does holding on to feelings for this old guy, how does it benefit you? And she said, Mark, it doesn't. I want the feelings gone. Get them out of here. I want my new life. I said, no, we don't do anything in life if it doesn't in some way benefit us, especially not repeatedly. How is this benefiting you? What feelings do you get from holding on to this connection? So she stopped and thought about it, and she was really honest with herself, and she kind of went into herself a bit. And she said, well, when I really think about it, when I get to think about this guy, when I get to think about this fantasy, I get this feeling of excitement. I get to feel connected to him. I almost feel healed, Mark. And what's more, I feel accepted. I feel understood. And I feel valued. These are pretty powerful feelings, right? And if she's feeling all these things, it suddenly dawned on her that, hey, no wonder I can't let go of the feelings. This fantasy, thinking about this guy, thinking about being with him, is my source of all these positive feelings. And it suddenly made sense to her why she couldn't let it go. Her brain was using that as an outlet to fill certain emotional buckets. So first of all, we have to appreciate our brain for doing that for us, even though we might not like it, even though it's trying to drag us back to our old pattern. That's why it happens. That's why we can't just wish the feelings away, because they serve a purpose to meet those needs. And this is where the challenging growth component of all this comes in. You see, as kids, we are dependent. We're dependent on our parents. We're dependent on them for food, for shelter, for our physiological needs, but we're also dependent on them for our emotional needs. We're dependent on them for a feeling of understood, to feel understood. We're dependent on them to feel accepted. We're dependent on them to feel valued. So we've got physiological needs that we're dependent on our parents for, but we've also got emotional needs. But the difference is, as we grow up and as we become stronger and more capable, our physiological needs, we can naturally take those over. We can naturally become independent of those. But in many cases, well-meaning but poor parenting doesn't allow us to independently take over those emotional needs. So she's with this guy, or not even with him, she has this fantasy where she's with this guy, and she's relying on that fantasy still as a 31-year-old to be dependent on that need to feel accepted, that need to feel valued from him, that need to feel understood. And it's her addiction to that and her inability to meet those needs on her own, which is where the real work is. The issue is, in the past, her relationships where she's been cheated on, where she's been betrayed, where she's been gaslighted, they've all happened not because she had a problem with wanting to feel understood or feel valued. Those things are all normal. She had a problem with wanting to feel understood and feel valued and not being able to set healthy boundaries around that. In the same way, a child cannot set boundaries with his or her parents around food or shelter, right? If mum and dad say, hey, you're eating on the roof, then you're bloody eating on the roof. A child can't set boundaries with those needs. She was unable to set boundaries with her needs to feel valued and to feel understood. So the reason the fantasy stuck with her is because she had to keep going back to get those needs met in a situation where she couldn't set any boundaries because she was a dependent. So the hard work for her is she has to make a decision. She has to either keep going back to these guys who are easy sources for these needs, but whom she can't set boundaries with and who continue to betray her and disrespect her, or she has to pull herself away and learn to meet those needs independently. Not so that she can stay independent, but so that she can be independent for long enough that she can source them from within and then go back to relationship and set healthy boundaries with receiving those needs. So I gave this client a choice. I said, hey, you can either continue with this fantasy, hell, you can go back to the guy in real life and continue to get these needs met, but in a dependent way where you can't set boundaries. And she said, no, I do not want to do that. I said, okay, then you've got to wean yourself off. The easy fix, hey, I get to go back to him and feel 100% understood, 100% valued straight away. You got to give up the addiction to the easy fix, and you've got to source from within as an independent before you can go back to relationship and be interdependent with a man. So I really want you to understand here that these feelings come not because they are trying to sabotage you, but because they're meeting a need that you've been dependent on in the past and that you haven't been able to set boundaries with. And when you pull yourself away for long enough to meet that need independently and do the work, get a coach, do your inner child work, whatever it takes to meet those needs independently, you'll be able to then go back to relationship and set healthy boundaries around receiving those needs so that you can feel all of those things with a man and in a relationship that's actually really healthy. So finally, with this client, what I had her do in the short term and what she needs to continue to practice is I had to have her sit with her younger self. Rather than going back to this guy and getting her fix, I had her sit for 15, 20 minutes with 10-year-old her and make 10-year-old her feel understood. She was the mum that 10-year-old her never had to make her feel valued, to make her feel accepted. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of tears, there was a lot of realization. It was the love that she'd never given herself truly. But in receiving that from herself, she weaned off it from the toxic, boundaryless source, which was her old pattern of guy, and built her ability to source it from within so she could then go back to receiving it with a man. Dependence to independence, back to interdependence. That's the journey this client was on, and that's the journey all of us are on in life. Hey, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to hear, can you relate to this? Have you been through this journey yourself? If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button with the little bell so you get notifications on future videos.